Well, it was about a week ago that the Mackinac Center for Public Policy said, hey, listen, House lawmakers, you ought to pass that Bill 5013 and give drivers a break on auto insurance rates. And fairly quickly after that, it didn't happen. And so whether or not the auto insurance reform effort continues, we imagine it will, but whether or not it does immediately remains to be seen. Mackinac Center for Public Policy's Michael Van Beek joins us this half hour to talk a little about that. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Thank you for the time today.
Absolutely.
So what was good about 5013?
Well, 5013 did a number of different important things that reforms that need to be done for the state. One, it would give drivers a choice about the level of coverage that they would want in their auto insurance policy. And right now, everyone is forced to buy an unlimited amount of coverage. And as you can imagine, an unlimited amount of coverage is extremely expensive. And Michigan's auto insurance premiums are the most expensive in the country. So that's one element. The other one is that it would require insurance companies to reduce premiums for people who chose a lower level of coverage, a limited amount of coverage. It also would establish a fee schedule, so it would, as it stands right now, hospitals and medical providers can basically charge auto insurance companies whatever price they think they can get away with for services, and that's why it's not uncommon to find the same procedures costing 2 or 3 or sometimes even 4 times more if they're performed as a result of treating an auto accident victim rather than an injury suffered some other way. And then another key element is anyone eligible for Medicare could opt out of medical coverage on auto insurance, and that would dramatically reduce their premium as well. So it did a lot of things focused on reducing premiums for drivers, and that's really the most important focus of this reform that we need to key up on.
And I realize I keep asking about something that has died in the House, but I guess it's important to understand the footing here because we presume this is going to come back again, right? Is that the sense?
Well, I mean, lawmakers have been toying with reforming the auto insurance laws for decades. Michigan consistently ranks as the most expensive state in the country to buy auto insurance. So, they hear from their constituents consistently that they're paying too much for these things, and I think it will come back in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it won't. 513 was a pretty ambitious bill. It did several different things. Maybe it'll come back more piecemeal, one bill at a time, doing one tweak at a time, maybe something like that. But the Senate has also shown some interest in this idea too. So maybe the Senate will lead on this. But it's just it's getting to the point now in Michigan where it's pretty ridiculous the prices that we have to pay for auto insurance premiums.
I heard some folks say, okay, this thing does make some of us uncomfortable when you have less coverage. Maybe you need more and you won't get it. But it seemed like the overarching theme here was for people who can't afford it and thus don't have anything, this is a step in the right direction. Was that your viewpoint?
Yeah, well, some insurance is better than no insurance.
Yeah.
So right now it's estimated that 1 in 5 drivers in Michigan don't have any insurance. It's estimated that half of the drivers in Detroit don't purchase auto insurance because it's so incredibly expensive.
Half.
Wow. And so, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's a lot, 50%.
It is. It's an estimate, but it's clearly a problem. And the other thing to keep in mind is the context of this. So House Bill 5013 would have allowed drivers to choose a limited amount of coverage, which was $250,000. The next highest state in the country that requires people to purchase medical coverage is New York State, and they require $50,000 of coverage. So Michigan would still be providing 5 times more coverage than the next highest state. So clearly this can be done. Other states do it, and other states' drivers pay much less to insurance premiums than what Michigan drivers do.
There was some back and forth discussion about the idea that the no-fault system helps eliminate lawsuits. Do you see it that way?
Well, that's how it's designed.
Yeah.
But over the course of the last 40 years, that's changed in Michigan. It's mainly been the result of the Michigan Supreme Court and some of the rulings that they've handed down on key issues related to auto insurance. And what they've basically done is made it much easier for people to sue an at-fault driver after an accident than what it used to be. And so what we see in Michigan is in 2010, there were about 5,500 lawsuits as a result of auto accidents. And in 2016, after this latest Supreme Court ruling, there were 8,700 lawsuits, a 58% increase. So it's Michigan's system. It's sort of a misnomer to call it a no-fault system because it really doesn't do a very good job of limiting the kind of lawsuits that people will file as a result of auto accidents.
So the no-fault system then is still effective, though, or should that go away too?
Well, I think it can be saved, but it needs to be reformed. So what the legislature should do is to tighten up, to restrict people's ability to sue as a result of an accident. And so that's the trade-off in this system is you get generous medical coverage that's guaranteed to you, and the trade-off is you can't, you're restricted in your ability to sue the person who hit you. But right now in Michigan, we have the generous benefits and the ability to sue the person who hit you. So we're paying for both. It's really not a no-fault system, but I think it can be saved if reforms are made to it.
Representative Bison from Battle Creek seems to focus on the fraud part of all of this, that the system has a fair amount of fraud going on, and that has to be part of this discussion. Do you see that as being significant, or is a certain amount of fraud inherent here?
Well, a certain amount of fraud is inherent, yes, but I think we should focus on or think about the impact that the unlimited coverage that drivers purchase, how that influences the incentives for people to try to commit fraud. So when you can win, when trial attorneys can win cases on and on year after year, and their clients can get an unlimited amount of benefits, and attorneys can get an unlimited amount of attorney fees suing for those benefits, you can see how this encourages more and more fraud. It encourages fraud for medical providers, and so it's I think if we capped that system or allowed people to choose a more limited coverage, it would put downward pressure on the incentives for people to commit fraud. Fraud is a real issue. It's hard to determine how much of that influences the prices that we pay, but it certainly has an influence. A lot of the one of the things that is agreed upon in Lansing is that a new fraud authority should be established in the state that really focuses on trying to stamp out fraud wherever it is.
One of the things that we hear mentioned, too, is the idea that credit ratings and other things are used to try and figure out what rates should be. Does Mackinac Center have a position on that?
Well, there might be some things that are worth looking at along those lines, but the other thing that we need to keep in mind is just how insurance works and how insurance companies operate, and they need to be able to price premiums according to the risks that they're taking on. So if you're somebody who has low risks for an insurance company, you're going to get a lower premium. If you're somebody who has indicators that you're a high risk, the insurance company is going to have to charge you more for the premium. That's just how insurance works. It's how insurance has to work in order for it to function properly. So I'm not a proponent of sort of restricting what insurance companies can use so much so that they can't operate anymore.
All right, so understandable, and right, the more risk that's taken, I suppose, the more we should pay. Now, there is another package of bills in Lansing that would address this issue. Where does Mackinac Center stand with that?
Well, yeah, there's a competing package of bills. It's 11 bills, and there's one good element that's similar to 5013 that we've been talking about, in that it would establish a fee schedule. So it would create cost controls for what medical providers could charge for procedures and services that they provide for people injured in auto accidents. So that's a good thing. The negative aspect of these package of bills is that several of them, about 6 of them, are aimed at making it easier for people to sue auto insurance companies and making it easier for trial attorneys to sue auto insurance companies. So that's, in my opinion, it's already quite easy for them to do that, and there isn't a reason to make it even easier. And if you think about that, the way insurance companies have to operate, if they're going to be more at risk of being sued, guess what they're going to have to do? They're going to have to increase the premiums that they charge people because they're going to have to factor that risk into what they're going to have to pay out in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think those packages of bills, it's House Bills 5101 to House Bill 5111, I don't think those actually will have an effect on reducing premiums because they will make it easier for people to sue auto insurance companies.
Well, it seems as though there should be a fair amount of motivation here to do something, given what we're paying. For example, a friend of mine just moved back to Detroit area, a one-car family, a very small, average car, nothing fancy, and the premium is like $3,000 a year just by virtue of where they're located. And I can tell you it was not a practice for them, and I imagine a lot of others, to call up their auto insurance agent and say, I'm thinking about buying a house at this address. What's the auto insurance premium there? So what gives here? We should have some motivation to change this. What's keeping this from being done? Well, I mean, it is a fact that the current policy is a cash cow for hospitals and for medical providers. The reason they ask people how they incurred their injury is because they know they can charge different rates depending on how that person was injured. So if you're injured in an auto accident, hospitals and medical providers know that they can charge exorbitant prices to auto insurance companies, and they have to pay it. If you're injured at your house and your private insurance has to cover it, or if you're on Medicare or Medicaid and they have to cover it, hospitals know that they've got fee schedules, they have cost controls in place, they've got certain things that they only certain levels that they can charge. So, I mean that's a key one. Hospitals do not want this to change. Hospitals are very large employers, and so they have a very powerful constituency, a very powerful lobby that fights against all of these kinds of changes. But in my opinion, at some point something will have to give because, as your friend experienced, it's just some of these premiums are just outrageous. There's a lot of people who the cost of insuring their car is more than the value of the car they're driving. Yeah, and that just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it sure doesn't because, generally if you look at it from the replacement cost, you say, why am I paying so much to replace a car that isn't worth this much? It's a crazy notion. So, what's your thought then? There will be another proposal out there that Mackinac Center can get behind. I think so. I don't think this issue is dead. I think 5013 really was an attempt to see if there was going to be bipartisan support for this. That there was a little bit of bipartisan support. It was mostly Republicans, but some Democrats, mostly those representing areas in and near Detroit, who came along with this. But most of the Democrats didn't vote in favor of it, and a sizable chunk of Republicans didn't either. So I think there might be a different approach here moving forward. It might be piecemealed. Maybe there will be a bill that will just do a fee schedule, maybe one that just limits or just provides people a choice on coverage, something like that. So it's not an all or nothing kind of proposition.
and maybe we'll move forward that way. But you're right, something's got to give, and some change has to come. Otherwise, I don't think the system is going to last much longer.
Mm-hmm. All right, interesting thought. We'll leave it there. Thank you, Michael.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Michael Van Beek, Mackinac Center for Public Policy.